is Terry Bradshaw, quarterback, Pittsburgh Steelers.
It's 7:15. There's a new home run champion of all time, and it's Henry Aaron.
It is time for the Past Our Prime podcast. Thanks for listening. I'm Scott Johnston alongside Bill Mahoney and supposedly Mark Hoffman.
He's not here today.
Not that I can hear.
What do you mean? This is,
Yeah.
this is of course, me. Or is it his evil twin?
What was the guy's name from Saturday Night Live? Who's the Dick Bardo or whatever? Dick
Bardo? Oh, Don Pardo.
I was thinking
right.
Paul Harvey.
There we go. Paul Harvey.
And that's the rest of the story.
Do that again, Mark.
And that's the rest of the story. I don't know, I got bronchitis or something, but it's making me sound like Barry White.
It is so true.
You've gone through nothing. I don't understand.
Much
No
of the
trauma.
country is freezing, but we are in the 60s here in Pasadena, heading towards 80 later in the week. But the person on the cover of this week's Sports Illustrated from January 27th, 1975 is in a much warmer place than even that. Cancun. Never been to Cancun. Been to the Bahamas and the Caribbean. Been to Hawaii a couple of times, but never been to any of the Mexican resorts. What about you guys?
Oh, I have.
I have been to
Acapulco.
Been to Cancun?
Cancun. Matter of fact, Cancun, we were on a cruise ship, so you get off the cruise ship or walking around. There's a guy in this little hut, and he's got a baby lion. Just baby, live, to take pictures with. We didn't get a picture with it, but it's beautiful. I kept thinking, oh, it's Mexico. They can
Simba.
bring a lion. Yeah, exactly. And he was holding it in his hand. It's about... He kept doing that, too. Chambalamba. And I just thought, okay.
Do you walk up and go, oh, that is so cute. Hi there, can I touch it?
How about you're missing two fingers?
That's right.
Very nice. Now let's talk about who is on that cover, one of the most famous supermodels of all time. And when you're talking supermodels, a good number of them got their start or at least were made famous by being on the cover of SI, and that is the case here with Cheryl Tiegs. Now for me as a 10-year-old, her fishnet see-through bathing suit might have been the first time I ever saw breasts.
It's a wonderful day.
Some people know where they were when JFK was shot or when Neil Armstrong landed on the moon. I remember being in my kitchen in Memphis, Tennessee, and thinking, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. So I wanted to ask you guys, can you remember the first time you saw a topless woman in a movie? I'll give you time to think about it.
I remember. I remember.
I know my exact one.
Mandy Pepperidge. In Animal House, 1978, have John Belushi to thank for that. When he's up on the ladder.
Yep.
And my dad somehow, you know what we did? We were going to see another movie, and we were early. And so my dad was like, well, let's sneak into this for a little bit. And like right as we walked in, I was like, what is this? And so Mandy Pepperidge, God bless you. Billy?
It was right around 74. My parents took us to a drive-in theater.
So 74, you're 9?
Yeah, about 9, 10 years old.
Okay.
And we're in the back seat. They thought we fell asleep. We were watching Thunderbolt and Lightfoot.
Oh, yeah.
And this lady walks up to the screen door, and she's completely naked. And I remember thinking, wow. And I remember my stepfather going, turn around and go to sleep. That image, even today, it's just ingrained in my head. I just go with Jeff Bridges and Clint Eastwood. Yeah, I just thought, I remember that.
I have actually two memories. The first one was, this is really weird. So my mom when I was a kid. Yeah.
Here we go. Oh, God.
I didn't mean that.
Do it in your
Not
radio
home
voice.
movies.
When I was with Debbie in Dallas.
So she would always go to movies to make sure it would be appropriate for kids to see.
Right.
Like she went to the movie Oliver, the musical Oliver in the late 60s, the movie version, to make sure that my sister and I would be appropriate for us to see. But then she started laxing on that rule. And I remember when The Godfather came out in 70 or 73, she took me to go see The Godfather. And I'm thinking, okay, great. And there's the...
So once again, 73, how old are you, 13?
Yeah, about 13, yeah.
That's about right.
And Godfather thing came out in 72, 72, 73. But anyway, so there's the scene where, Michael's in Italy with his Italian wife before the car bomb blows her up, And it's the wedding night, and she, takes her negligee off, and there she is. And I'm sitting there with my mom right next to me going, damn.
Go get popcorn, Mark.
Hey, Mom, that's a great rack.
The other one was... The other one was... And it was
34C?
Yes.
The same year in '73, my friend, one of my friends, Mark, one of my many friends named Mark, his dad took me and Mark, the two Marks, to go see Magnum Force, the second Gary Clinton movie.
I love that.
And there's a scene at the beginning where there's some party and the guy comes in killing everyone, and there's this one naked girl gets shot right between her.
I remember that.
Yeah, and falls out the window.
Right. Yeah.
And I remember going, yeah, okay, this is, you know. So,
There you go.
that was
There you
my
go.
experience. Yeah.
I have a thing about what you were saying about your mom watching movies. I did the same thing with the TV show Glee, because both my kids are into musicals. So we're watching it as a family, and they're really enjoying it. But then it starts to get a little bit risque. So I start doing the same thing. I start recording it. I'd come home from work and I'd watch it, and then I'd be like, oh, you know what? That's not really appropriate for 10 and 5-year-old. Then I'd watch the next week's. Not appropriate. I'd watch. Pretty soon, I was like, you know what? I'm watching Glee.
That's right. That's right.
They're not watching Glee anymore, and so I had to put Glee on hold for a little bit. So let's start with a letter from the publisher. What do you got, Mark?
Yeah, so this was really interesting. So this is all about one of the models. Like Cheryl Tiegs, for instance, is considered the most famous model in the swimsuit issue. But there was another model in this issue that had a very interesting history. And that is Margot Hemingway. And, she's 19 years old. She's in the swimsuit issue. Beautiful girl. She's the granddaughter of the famous writer Ernest Hemingway. And her younger sister, Mariel Hemingway, would have a big movie career. Right. Margot actually started doing, was the first star before Mariel. She got in. She did the movie, I think it was called Lipstick.
It was.
And, she did movies and she was successful, but she had problems.
She did.
And she ended up dying at the age of 42 from a drug overdose, possible suicide, which is, such a shame. She was 6 feet tall, very majestic, beautiful model, and she was had quite an aura around her. And
That name, that's a tough name.
Yeah.
Man.
right, it's a tough name. And look,
Especially back then.
But they're showing her on she's like on water skiing in the little bathing suit in the pictorial. I always remember her. She was unbelievably beautiful.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. That's a tough name.
And it might be like I say something to the family because Ernest Hemingway killed himself too. So
Mariel's still alive. Am I right?
I believe so.
I think so. I think she is.
Yeah. Time to start things off with the scorecard, and we might have to rethink our January 13th show and guest Chris, don't call me Chrissy McCarran. Mm-hmm. That's because the whole point of the article was his record-breaking 547 wins back in '74. But hold on. A computer glitch shows that he actually only had 546. Still a record, but not 547. The error occurred before Chris passed Sandy Hawley's mark of 515. So scratch that heart-tugging story of having to catch brother Greg in the stretch to get the record, and our sympathies to Father Herbert, who missed the record-breaking race now because of this glitch. So didn't beat his brother for the record, and his dad wasn't on hand for it either. So way to go, IBM.
And that was a great story. You beat your brother to get it. What a way to, they should have just, buried that one and give it to him, because that's a great story.
Yep. Billy, what do you got?
Okay, this is about George Johnson. He was a center, 6'11" center for the Golden State Warriors. How many times have we seen guys that are really tall? Do we want to walk up and go, do you? That's what they do to him. So he says no. He says, instead of saying, yeah, I play basketball, he likes to say, no, I'm a gynecologist. Other times he says he's a pediatrician or a podiatrist or an anesthesiologist. And now he actually says he enjoys being approached. Jockey, that's right. He says, people show great respect for my ability to pass med school despite my height. So, but the better one comes from Johnny Kerr. He said Johnny Kerr, who was now at the time he was a business manager of the Chicago Bulls. When they asked him if he played basketball, he goes, no, ma'am. He once told a nice old lady, I'm a jockey for a dinosaur.
Oh, he did say that.
Yeah, there you go.
Jockey for
right
a
when he said, I
dinosaur.
thought, I got to go back and get him. I was going to cut that out, and you
I
said
like
it.
that, jockey. I would have said I'm a proctologist, and you are an ass.
Yes. Very nice, Mark.
Yeah.
That was Fred. That's his alter ego,
exactly.
Fred.
And now we go to the break.
Yeah, that's right.
Mark, what do you got?
I got the vowelable trivia. Back in 1975, who was the only active major leaguer with all 5 vowels in his first name?
I know. My dad used to ask me this. Well, not all the time, but I remember him because I was like, wow, that's right. So it's weird. I'm not very good with trivia, but I knew this one.
You'll never forget it.
No, Aurelio Rodriguez.
Aurelio Rodriguez.
Aurelio.
That's right, Gatto, and he was the Tigers' third baseman.
He was a good player.
He was a really good defensive third baseman.
glove.
Had a little
Yeah.
pop.
Yep.
Yeah, they got him in a trade with the Washington Senators. They got him and Eddie Brickman and Joe Coleman. And you know who they traded to the Washington Senators?
Danny McLean.
You're right, Danny McLean.
Coleman had a good career.
Oh,
Yeah,
Coleman
he
had
did.
great careers
Yeah.
in Detroit. That was definitely a lopsided trade for the
Yeah,
Tigers.
because McLean on the
Yeah, just went
downside, right?
Yep.
from that point on. But
You know, Muhammad Ali was famous for two things, maybe three, okay? His post-career philanthropy, his fighting career, and talking. What'd he say in this one, Mark?
Oh, so Ali. So basically, Ali was asked, if his come opponent Chuck Webner was the white hope, and he said, "That's the only hope he's got."
You know what? That was the other thing. He was so quick.
He was. He was.
quick.
And you couldn't blame Ali because, for taking him lightly, because no one thought it would be
Yeah.
much of a match.
Well, that
And-
was Tyson Douglas years ago. You just think
absolutely.
going in that this has no chance, and the other guy says,
Right.
"Wait a minute, I'm in the ring with you. I do have a chance."
And Chuck Wepner,
Yeah.
we'll get to this, in later issues when he's on the cover when he faces Ali. Basically, the movie Rocky is
That's right.
sort of based on that time in
right.
his life.
Now I want to see that fight.
I know, right?
Now I want to watch the fight.
Right.
Yeah, and you can now.
First article is about a different Bill Walton than we knew, that's for sure. Bill Walton, won't you please play ball? Walton's rookie season, not going well. He hasn't played in 8 weeks because of an assortment of injuries, and Sports Illustrated writes that the situation in Portland had become intolerable. Who knew? Season ticket sales up by over 3,000, and they were mostly disappointed because the big redhead had missed half the season to this point, which would become kind of the overall story of Walton's career in some regard. He has a bone spur in his left ankle, the first of many foot injuries for Bill, but his trainer, Ron Cupp, threw him under the bus, saying most players aren't bothered by spurs. He also jammed a finger. His teammates are referring to him as Captain Flake. They started calling it a brain spur. If the spur wasn't the problem, Rick Tellender of SI writes, what is? He's financially, quote, set for life playing a game he loved. They really all thought it was in his head and that he was faking an injury. He said he didn't like being listed as 7 feet tall because, as his dad said, that's when you started to be seen as a freak. Keep in mind, he's just 23 at the time. Didn't like to stand out. John Wooden's style of play was perfect for him because it was so revolved around a 5-on-5, and so he didn't. But in Portland, he's now billed as the guy, and Billy, he's just not taking to that, is he?
No, it just seemed like the teammates didn't seem to like him very much. And also, the Bill Walton that they talk about in here is not the Bill Walton that we knew later on in life, the fun-loving, the storytelling, the singing. There was once where they said he was on a plane, and a lady pushed her seat too far back. Walton stood up, told her briefly what she could do with herself, and then found another seat. He also did an autograph session where a bunch of kids were coming there. He had a little bit of a bad finger, and he yelled out, "I'm not signing autographs here." That's not the Bill Walton that we knew to come and love, that we loved. So when I read that, I kept thinking, no, that's not the guy. But one Los Angeles businessman called him an egocentric child, a 22-year-old going on 11.
Oh, there's some immaturity at that age.
He was a young guy.
And I'm sure he would have been the first to admit that,
Later in life.
Yes, but I'm saying, but when you read these and you go back, that gives you such a different perspective. It's like with George Foreman. We know Foreman, not just the fighter. We know what he did with the grills and everything, and they do that with Walton. I'm like, wait a minute, no, that's not the guy I know and love.
But we're reading. We have finished products.
We do.
To now go back and look at and be like, oh, look at how they were at this time in his life. Because there's a quote here from Wooden that is really interesting. He says, I tried to tell him it would be the emotional and not the physical part of the game that would be difficult, that in the pros, it's basically not a team game. I also felt he would need discipline, that underneath he wants a firm hand, which is something Lenny hasn't used. There's no one to tell him no on the Trailblazers, which Wooden was
it was on
I mean,
Well,
he was like a father.
And
in that
Walton
regard.
was the
And he-
Trailblazers at that time.
Right.
I think I know what the problem is that, first of all, Coach Wooden would not allow him to let his hair grow like that and that beard grow like that. So maybe if he had that little discipline, it would have, like,
Maybe.
had him focused,
Absolutely. Or just the fact that he'd, maybe focus his rebelliousness towards that, I'll show the coach that, who knows. But he would only play 35 games his rookie season, averages 13 points and almost 13 boards a game. And the team did improve by 11 games, and they would get better from that point on, as did he. He got healthy. But, rocky start for Bill Walton in Portland. I never knew that.
No, and the thing is it's easy, like you said, we have the finished product. If we went back in our life when we were 21 or 22 years old, people would say that what we did and go, I can't believe you were like that.
Right.
At least he gets to have that championship.
Two
year
of them,
Portland,
too.
Which is,
Yeah.
So,
Next up, hockey, courting disaster. Another of these stories I had never heard of. A guy by the name of Dave Forbes, who played for the Bruins in '75, got into a fight with Minnesota North Stars Henry Boucher. Thank you. And hit him with the end of his stick. He got a 10-game suspension, but he was indicted as well by a grand jury, and if convicted, could go to prison for up to 3 years. The repercussions of this against violent contact in sports could be enormous. So that was a very interesting case to think that it got taken out of the hands of the league and put into the court system.
Yeah, and the trial ended with a hung jury, and they were never refiled. So in a sense, Forbes got away with it, but that ended Boucher's career. He never played again.
No, I think he did take him to a civil court and did get a lawsuit settlement there, some sort of financial settlement.
But I'm saying he hit him with the butt of his stick above his eye, but then when he went down, he threw the stick away and then jumped on and pounded him for a little bit. So, double the injuries there.
What I found fascinating about this one, and I wonder if this was the basis, there was a CBS TV movie that came out in '77, so, a couple years after this. And I wonder if this was a basis for that. And it was called The Deadliest Season. And it starred Michael Moriarty before he was on Law and Order. Anyway, so he plays a hockey player, and he ends up killing another hockey player on the ice and gets charged with, manslaughter and stuff. And it's a whole thing like that. And I wonder if that served sort of as the basis, or
possibly
the story.
Yeah.
Well, there's also that going on. There was what is in overseas. Adam Johnson was killed by.
That's right.
The one got killed by and they say that the guy did it on purpose, clipped him with his neck with his skate on purpose.
Yeah.
And nothing's happened with it, but it's sort of in that same vein
That's right. I
of
forgot about that. That was about a year or so
Yes,
ago.
it was. He was on the ice. He went down. They collided. He went down, and the guy's skate cut his neck.
Oh.
But they're saying that some people are saying that he did it on purpose.
Race, but what, he was black, wasn't he?
Yeah, I believe.
I think so.
So I remember saying these things can't happen, but this was the first one that fortunately didn't go anywhere. It would have opened a door
for football,
everywhere,
every
everyone
sport,
running,
every sport.
going to the mound.
Right? Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
What's interesting about that movie, The Deadliest Season, apparently that was the debut, the first appearance for Meryl Streep and anything.
Is that right? Wow.
Yeah.
Woman that was told that she could never act and should get out of the business. Whoever said that?
Yeah. In pursuit of higher earnings, Stan Smith is one of the greatest tennis players of all time. But 1974 was a down year for the former number one player, and after some rest and relaxation on his honeymoon, he went to Baja California. He was number one in the early 70s, really never got back to that level. And I'm only bringing this up because I remember growing up Stan Smith shoes that were made popular in the late 70s by Adidas, and I would venture to guess I did, that he made much more money on those shoes than he did in his tennis career. And he was a very good tennis player, don't get me wrong. But, I can remember the Stan Smiths. You guys
They're still around, aren't they?
I believe they're
still around.
Yeah.
They say they're not for using in tennis now.
I know. Isn't
But
that
you
funny?
can wear them at least. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Wearing Stan Smiths for tennis, and you can't play tennis in them.
Right. He has the word from Sicily. This was an interesting character named Nick Maletti. He basically owned Cleveland.
Yeah.
He owned the Indians, the Cavs, the Crusaders of the WHA, and the Coliseum at Richfield. Of Italian descent, but born in Cleveland, Maletti didn't have great wealth to buy these teams. He had put together groups to buy them. He never had more than 10% of the Indians or the Crusaders. He's a minority owner, but he was able to install himself as the leader in these groups more often than not. He's the president of these teams. So this guy was Mr. Cleveland.
He was. I think he also was trying to buy the Indians, and I think the group that he had, there were two major partners in that group to buy the Indians that pulled out because they went to join somebody else, and this was probably in 73, to join somebody else in their pursuit of a major league team, and that was George Steinbrenner and the New York Yankees.
Oh, that's right.
Greatest deal in sports history. What did he buy it from CBS for? What, $6 million? What was it? It was
billions.
Yeah, the $6 million in 1973, 73. It was a lot of money,
right.
but not.
Yeah.
I'm just going to add on to the back end of that. You said about building the Richfield Coliseum in 74.
Yeah.
Where was the Wepner-Muhammad Ali fight held? At that Richfield Coliseum.
Is that
in
right?
75. Yeah, so he did, he
attracted
he
some
did.
big things.
He did.
That's back when boxing, when we were covering boxing in the, 80s and 90s, pretty much all the big fights were in Vegas.
Vegas or Atlantic City.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they used to travel.
They did.
Right? People forget the Douglas Tyson fight. That was in Japan.
It was.
Right.
It was.
And that was weird for us.
And no one sent anybody out there.
Right.
I heard ESPN didn't send anybody because they thought, he'll walk through
Right.
and we're done.
Think of that.
And then they thought, oh, boy, we got to get someone on that.
Yeah. So, Maletti says there's a old Sicilian saying that bread gives life and flowers give the reason for living. Sports are like flowers. He was a character. Died just a few months ago at the age of 93.
That's right. You say that. We talked about Dave Forbes. He just died recently.
I
as
saw
well, just
that.
a few months ago.
Yeah.
So I thought, man, two people in this magazine.
Yeah. Well, when you're going back 50 years, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Someone who is still with us, Old Gods, Young Goddesses. As we mentioned, this is the SI swimsuit issue, which for sports fans was usually a dreadful issue, but for boys and young men was possibly the greatest thing to ever come in your mail.
Yep.
Cheryl Tiegs is the cover model, and the shoot is done by Walter Yost, who we had on the show last summer. Arguably, Walter had the greatest job of all time, which isn't to diminish his talent by any means, but he went to some of the greatest sporting events ever, and more often than not was sent to some tropical paradise each year to photograph some of the most beautiful women in the world, and he got paid well for it.
I don't know, that very first picture they have in there. Is it Jennifer Campbell? I'm trying to remember the model's name, but she's like in snow, and it just looks like, oh my God. You can just see she's trying to smile, but it's like, I'm in a lot of pain.
I thought the interesting thing of the article, not necessarily the pictorial, but the article is that Cancun, which you guys have both been to, was only 5 years old at the time, and it was basically a made-up place. The 1970, the Cancun project was approved by the Mexican government, and construction began to create the tourism zone, residential areas, and an international airport. It transformed Cancun from a deserted peninsula to the thriving metropolis that stands today. So they built it out of nothing. It'd be like if they built, casinos in Vegas.
I remember we went to a bar, Mara and I, and it was like on the water, and it was like a party bar. And like what a lot of people do, there'd be these like little windows, and they would jump out the window into the water, these people, when they got really drunk and stuff. So,
Did you do it?
oh, of course, many times.
Yeah, so rarely did I never, just like in if I ever had a Playboy, you don't get these to read the articles. No. So, but I read this one by
Good for
by
you.
Jerry Kirschenbaum.
Yep.
And it was mostly on this new resort called Cancun.
Now Cancun's really popular with everybody. It's now the place where people go to all the
Right?
time. Yeah, have been for many years.
Yeah.
Getting the opportunity to photograph and write about these beautiful women in these beautiful settings is an amazing assignment. And Kirkpatrick had that chance, sort of. We'll let him explain in a little bit, when he was a staff writer for Sports Illustrated. And in fact, in 1989, Curry was given the opportunity to write about Cheryl Tiegs for the 25th swimsuit issue with Kathy Ireland on the cover. And our friend Curry joins us now to talk about that and a bit more. And Curry, some things are a bit more exciting than others, but as you were telling us before we started, these exotic assignments weren't quite as exotic as they seemed for us, because you were writing this from New York City.
Well, unfortunately, I also, being the college basketball guy at the magazine, we always ran the swimsuit issue in February, right in the heart of basketball season. So I really never got to go on a swimsuit shoot, nor did I write the story about. The stories usually were, about the site where they shot it, either an exotic island or a place nobody ever heard of. And the writers, on occasion, more than once, as I remember, didn't even go on the photo shoot. They went to the location at a different time, earlier in the year, in January or even before that, to write the story that accompanied all the photos. So it was, and sometimes they didn't even go to the site. They wrote it from New York. That was in the early days before they started spending so much money on this issue and the photo shoot and going to this getting a place to go to. But as I told you before, there was a woman in charge of this issue named Julie Campbell, who was so important to the magazine, and you would think it was one issue a year, but it was a year-round job that Julie had, of course, to arrange the sites and get the models involved, et cetera, and who she was going to pick. And it was really an amazing job she had. As I told you guys, when she died a few years ago, the New York Times did a huge piece on her death, not just an obituary, but a really story about Julie and how important she was to the magazine, of course, to the swimsuit issue.
Last week, Curry, we did a show where you were in Indiana in January, as was per your life back in the day, covering the Hoosiers and Bobby Knight and super sub John Laskowski. And this week we're talking about Cheryl Tiegs, who was in the Seychelles Islands, which, like you said, some of these places we had never heard of. That's apparently off the east of Africa. So a little bit different in who you were covering and where the story was taking place.
Yeah, it was. Of course, I was a good friend of Walter Yost, the famous photographer who shot a lot of these swimsuit issues. And in the old days, when in the first 25 years of doing the swimsuit issue, they would only have 2 or 3 models that posed for the photos, and Walter was the only photographer that went to the shoot and had all these, just the assignment to do it himself. And as the tradition went on, they had more and more models every year, and of course more and more photographers shot the thing. So, Walter was my really only connection to what was happening on these swimsuit issues. He would tell me these horror stories about how, though they had to get up in like 4 a.m. to get the proper light to set up everything around the rocks and the beaches and the boats and wherever they shot these exotic photos. And they usually started pre-dawn, because to get the lighting that they wanted, and the poor models would have to get, it was no picnic for these models to shoot this thing. It was really a difficult assignment.
Now, Curry, like you said, you were the college basketball guy, obviously doing great at that. How did they pick you, and why did they pick you to do the interview with Cheryl Tiegs?
When you called me about reminiscing about this cover, this issue, nobody knew about this issue, what we were doing, until the writers. I remember the way I found out. Andre Laguerre, the managing editor, called me in one day in January to explain that they were going to do a 25th anniversary issue and they were going to try to go to some of the cover models and what they were doing now, sort of a look back into their careers since they'd been on the cover. And I thought, well, that's a great idea. And he sat there and he said, and Curry, we've given you Cheryl Tiegs. well, after I fell off my seat, you know, because she was about the most famous of all of them. And, you know, I was stunned, and of course, always had known about Cheryl Tiegs, had never met her or anything about her, but that's how I found out. And, you know, we arranged it. They gave me Cheryl's number. Julie Campbell had all the numbers, of course, of the models, and she called me in, and I guess she called all the other writers. I think there maybe were about, I can't remember, maybe about 10 girls that we, you know, wrote stories on in their background, what they had been doing since they were on the cover. And Julie gave me Cheryl's number and said she'd already gotten in touch with all the girls, including Cheryl, and they were all very cooperative. Said, fine, you know, just set it up, have Curry call me, which I did. And she was great on the phone, and we set up a time and, you know, a meeting place, and that's how it all started.
When you talk to your friends, when Sports Illustrated first came out with a swimsuit issue, some people were like, well, what's the sporting magazine doing a swimsuit issue? And later this becomes like a cultural phenomenon. People like are waiting for this edition once a year. Were people initially resistant to it, or from the beginning when you would talk to people like, oh, that's a great idea?
Well, one of the things that happened, and we all used to talk about it, was immediately after the issue came out, we would get letters upon letters of people canceling the magazine. Mm-hmm. They came from doctors' offices, and doctors didn't want to put the issue in their outer rooms anymore. Real estate people called. They were offended that, you know, these skimpy swimsuits were being shown, you know, over these spectacular models in our magazine. Also, we got tons and tons of letters from mothers of 10 to 14-year-old boys and said, you know, you're killing our education. My poor son, I'm not going to let him look at this trash. You know, we cancel our subscription. I mean, tons of these letters came every year. And in the office down the hall, they'd have a printout. Every week they'd have a printout of our letters. So we used to look forward, all writers and editors look forward to reading all the cancellation letters. It didn't sway Andre Laguerre from shooting more and more swimsuit issues with less and less fabrics and more skin. It went on and on. And so that's one of the results of the issue. But as you say, it became iconic and, you know, became probably the magazine's most famous issue each year that we did.
Now, Curry, I know growing up, I used to have to sneak to look at those SI issues. My mom would catch me and go, "What are you doing?" But you, like you said, you got to talk to Cheryl Tiegs on the phone. Take me into the room with you. The first time you lay eyes on her, the first time you meet her, what are your impressions of her?
Now, this was what, in 89? Was that when it was?
36 years ago.
We don't like to talk about that.
36 years. And it was 20 some years since she had been on the cover. So this is a long time, and a lot of attitudes about talking about women and how beautiful they are. I don't want to, you know, seem, I just want to be careful here.
Yeah,
Sure.
But you know, the way you put it, the first time I laid eyes on her, that's about what I would say too. She had an apartment in New York, and of course I had an apartment in New York. I had never seen, all the years I lived in New York, I had never seen or been in an apartment that was the entire floor of the building. You know, that's where wealthy people live. And so I went up to the door of the apartment, and she greeted me at the door, and I'll never forget what she had on. As you say, first time I laid eyes on her, it was she had on a lime green suede top that I can only describe as it was a shoulderless top, and it was part of a suit. The other part of the suit were the same color, lime green short shorts. Now this was in, as we know, it was in January. The issue came out, I think, late January, early February. So this must have been like 3 weeks before that. It's freezing outside, but of course she was inside, and it looked like one of the outfits she would wear. It wasn't a swimsuit, but it wasn't, much more fabric than that. And I gotta say, I don't want to see him again, but she was breathtaking. I'll just put it that way. She wasn't just a swimsuit model. She was Cheryl Tiegs. She was this was when she was 41 years old. This is 20 some years after she appeared in the fishnet white swimming suit that made her an iconic, famous celebrity. But I'm looking at a woman who's 41, and she looked, I swear she didn't look much older than she was when she shot the swimsuit issue. And she ushered me in her apartment, and again, it was an apartment that spread out. It was the entire floor of the building. Now the building wasn't that huge, but it was big enough to be a house, and it had a staircase to go to another floor, which again I had never seen in an apartment. But so the situation, I had to get a hold of myself. Let's put it that way, to start talking to her.
We are talking with Kirkpatrick of Sports Illustrated. We just did a show on the legendary Curt Gowdy, and in 2001, Curry won the Curt Gowdy Media Award given out by the Basketball Hall of Fame to outstanding basketball writers and broadcasters, a well-deserved honor for sure. And Curry, Cheryl was the first model to be on the cover more than once. She was in fact on it in 1970, the issue we're talking about, 1975, again in 1983. When you wrote your article about her in 89, she was kind of the matriarch of SI supermodels. I'm sure she loves that. But, before there was Christy, and before there was Carol Alt and Rachel Hunter, Elle, Paulina, you name it, Cheryl was the first one that kind of was like, wow, on Sports Illustrated, wasn't she?
Yeah, well, I think she was the first, she was the first girl to become a celebrity from being on and a superstar celebrity. She wasn't just a model anymore. She also, as I said, when we did this issue, she was 41 years old, and she still was doing heavy modeling work on covers of, magazines, Cosmopolitan and Glamour and, Harper's Bazaar. She was, as I wrote in the story, she was at the top of her profession for about 23 years. And as I wrote, who else has ever done this? And I said, nobody. And that's the comparison. That's how famous and how long, how her longevity came into play. Unfortunately, when I wrote about this, and I probably concentrated on it too much in the magazine, in the article, I kept going back to the fact that, to her age, and the fact that she was still doing this. And as I told you guys, I got a letter from her. She wasn't really happy about some of those things in the article, and that was one of the things that she said, you really didn't have to keep referring to the fact that I was 41. Well, all women, all men, as a matter of fact, they don't want to probably keep talking about their age when they're that old, but it just, I kept referring to it in the article because she sort of was just there, and still Cheryl Tiegs,
right?
Some over 20 years later, and I guess I couldn't get over it. I was just so stunned how young she seemed. First of all, she was wonderful to talk to me. She was very nice, and she loved the idea of the magazine, going back and doing stories on the girls and what they've become since they've been on the cover. And I wrote about how she'd become this terrific businesswoman. She got I think she got the first real modeling contract with a magazine such as Sears. I mean, she became, a pioneer in that after full-fledged mercantilism. I mean, she was at the top of business women at the time, and she was the first to do that, I think, too. After she did that, a number of modeling icons then became great business women and started having fragrance lines and clothes lines and furnishing lines, and she was the first.
Have you heard any stories where there like someone that Sports Illustrated ever approached for one of these swimsuit issues and they just said no, or something that was like really ambitious that I don't know, that was, at that time didn't go through?
You mean a model that turned down the assignment? I have never heard of
like
that.
If Sports Illustrated called you, you pick up and you take it.
Yeah, I would think that never happened. Number one, because Julie Campbell was such good friends with all these models, and when the swimsuit issue started, and for the first 4 or 5 years, I think the reputation got around that the shoot was terrific, the way the magazine handled it, and the models all loved it. They were treated so wonderfully, and it was such a career-defining move, not to just be on the cover, but to be inside the magazine. A lot of girls that went on to great careers, were not on the cover; they were inside the magazine, and just to be on the cover was sensational. I know that Cheryl told me, and Walter Yost used to tell me that, Julie Campbell, after shooting all these girls wherever they were, the Seychelles or Costa Rica or, wherever they were, of course, they took all these thousands and thousands of pictures, and the girls never knew where, never knew if their particular shot was going to be on the cover until, the week the magazine came out. They kept it quiet. They kept it, the Julie and the crew at the magazine, it was a tremendous secret not to be let out that who was going to be what was going to be the cover shoot. So I thought that was kind of funny that the girls were kept in the dark for so long, and it was such a great thrill and pleasure and tribute to be the cover girl that week.
I mean, I was just thinking, there's like almost a similarity to Saturday Night Live in that starting in the mid-'70s, and once it established itself, if you became a musician and you got to play on Saturday Night Live, you got some notoriety. Or if you wanted to plug something, you got notoriety. And the same thing with Sports Illustrated. If you got into that swimsuit issue, then people really knew who you were.
Yeah, Cheryl told me. As a matter of fact, especially, she was very young when she shot this, her cover. And she told me that it was such a punch and spurning her career, and especially with men, that, she'd been on a lot of shoots for, women's magazines, as I said, even Brides and Glamour and Cosmopolitan, but she wasn't really that well known among men until this thing happened. Mm-hmm. And she told me that specifically, that men got to know who she was.
Well, that photo in 1978 introduced her to men.
Exactly.
Curry, you are an amazing writer. You're a Hall of Fame writer.
Oh, well, thank you.
But I know you talk about a letter that Cheryl had sent you. I'm not going to go into that. But if you had the opportunity now to meet with her now, what would you say to her?
Well, the one thing that she wrote that I put in the article that we really disagreed on that she didn't like. I mentioned that her acting career, it didn't really work out, and I put it in the article. I said she tried acting, and she didn't like it. She told me she didn't like it. She never really wanted to be an actress, and I thought I got that. I thought I got that across in the article, but she did not think that I made it clear that she really didn't try it. She didn't even like it, and that's why she wasn't successful at it. I think like all, like all, let me put it, celebrities and even, artists and singers and comedians and actors, when a story is written about them, if it's not a puff job, that's all they remember is the negative stuff in these stories. I mean, I remember that with all the sports figures I did.
Sure.
That, there could be, 80 paragraphs in the story. If there was one that talked about something negative, that's the one they remember. I was kind of disappointed that Cheryl, took that form and really concentrated on that particular thing that I said in the article. And then she said she didn't really like it. So that disappointed me. If I was to see her now, if I was to call her up now, I'd love to talk to her now and explain why I wrote what I wrote.
Well, look, I read it and the article, and I see it through the lens of how you intended it to be, but I'm not the object or the subject of the article either. In fact, like I mentioned earlier, we spoke with John Laskowski of Indiana last week, and you did an article on how great Indiana was, and it was kind of like the coming out to the country for Bobby Knight. And he said how much Bobby Knight didn't like the article. So,
Hated it. That was the first article I ever did on Knight. And he hated it. And he wrote a letter to her, had the AD, Indiana AD, write a letter to the magazine going down about 10 or 12 things in the article that, he said were either misquoted or were off the record or this and that. And, so that's what you go through as a writer. But Knight and I had a love-hate relationship from then on. I mean, I would write several things about him that he hated and other things, and he would like. I'll tell you, I got a book one time at Christmas, a Christmas present from Al McGuire and Bobby Knight, and it was a title. The book was titled "All I Know About Basketball" by Kirkpatrick. That was the cover that they sent me as a joke. And you open up the book, of course, and every page was blank. And then they both signed it. Best regards and have fun and all that. On the inside, that was Knight. Another time, I know we're getting into Knight. I don't know how we got from Cheryl Tiegs to Bobby Knight, but that's 60 Minutes once called me. They were doing a piece on Bobby Knight, and they had read a number of them. This is way into my career and Knight's career, and they wanted me to come on. Dan Rather was doing the interview. I went to New York, and they said, "Look, we can't get anybody to say anything negative about this guy. We're calling all the college coaches and talking to everybody, and all they do is give us this puff stuff about how great a coach he was." And he's had all these. This was when he'd had all. He'd been thrown out of games and suspended by the athletic director, and had all these controversial moments, and nobody would talk about it apparently. So that's what I was on there to do, to be the bad guy, to talk about Knight. And so I did my 10 minutes. At one point, Rather asked me, because every time a pro job opened, they would talk about would Bobby Knight go to the NBA? And Rather asked me, what do you think if that would happen? How would he do in the NBA? And I said, well, Well, I think about the fourth or fifth practice, one of his players would punch him out because he'd be so denigrating to the players. He'd never make in the NBA. But the rest of the stuff I said about Knight, we talked about our differences and what else I'd written about him. But about 2 weeks later, I think it was at the NCAA finals, I think, and I saw him at a press conference. He was at the back watching it. He wasn't playing in that particular one, and he came up to me and was very nice. And he said, "Listen, I saw the piece, and I'm glad you kept some of what we've had, our problems in the past. You kept them confidential," and he appreciated that. So we had this thing, and then other times he wouldn't talk to me, and he threatened to throw me off of second floor. So that was Knight. Now let's get back to Cheryl, which is much more pleasant conversation.
Yes, she never threatened to throw you out of the building, so that's a
No,
plus.
but I wanted to ask you, as readers, when you read that, did you think she was some kind of witch, or did you think she was nice or
She
great,
sounded
or what
awesome.
did you think?
Yeah.
She sounded amazing.
I was
Yeah.
going to ask you earlier, she comes off as like this kind of shy and introverted. And in the piece, I'm thinking,
Yeah.
actually she's got a little more sass to her and
Yep.
and she's got opinions. So I thought you really portrayed a different side than what her persona was.
Well, let me just give you a little bit of background. She was very shy, and when we first started talking, I could tell she really didn't want to open up anything and private stuff, which we didn't get into in the piece anyway, in the interviews. I spent a couple of days with her actually, and but she came from a family of farmers in Minnesota before they moved to California, and of course she then became the ultimate California beach girl. That's what she looked like. And but her friends growing up she told me were all middle class, people, waitresses and gas station attendants. She mentioned her dad was a mortician, and so I think, and she absolutely hated being a celebrity. And she talked about that a lot, and that's in the article a lot. I started out the article quoting from gossip columns, which she used to be, page 6. She was a disco queen back then. She dated all these celebrities, and I talked about, there was one gossip column that mentioned President Carter meeting Cheryl Tiegs, and being himself being so stunned that he blurted out, "My God, you're so beautiful." This is the president of the United States.
Mhm.
Okay, so I didn't mind it that I was so stunned, but I started out the article talking about, she was this gossip queen, and now she had become this wonderful, noted businesswoman. And I talked about the differences over her career, how she'd become that, and she finally kind of talked. I got her to say some stuff that I don't think she would have said right at the beginning of our interview. I got to tell you, we talked for about an hour in her apartment, and she was living at the time with the son of his name was Tony Peck. He was son of Gregory Peck.
Oh, okay.
And he was kind of a I don't know afterward if they ever married. She lived with him for about 5 years, but she had been married a couple times when I did the article, to Peter Beard, and then a director before that. But at any rate, she after about an hour, we went to lunch, and she put on this really wonderful leather. Again, I don't forget these things. This leather, another suede number, floor length, and we walked a couple blocks in this freezing cold. Of course, she still had on her outfit, and we walked to a French restaurant, which was one of her haunts, and they all knew her in there. And of course, I didn't know how to pronounce any of the menu, but I ordered a salad because I wasn't even hungry, And Cheryl Tiegs ordered French fries, and that's all she said. I wrote a little about this.
Yeah.
That but she was just scarfing down these French fries. I said, I wondered to myself, how does she, keep her shape? She told me about she used to do the stairs in her apartment, the back stairs, and she herself told me this, that she had a time set when she walked the stairs out there on in an apartment house, and how the workers used to just by chance having to fix a staircase or something, be out there waiting for her when she did the stairs. I mean, so she would make fun of herself doing this. I thought that was kind of neat. But I'm glad I always wondered, she thought this was this awful portrayal of her, and yet I always wondered what readers thought. And I read the thing, just the other day when you called, and I always wondered what readers thought, because if I read this thing, not knowing her, I would have thought she's this unbelievable, terrific person.
She came off as an intelligent businesswoman to me. Someone that, the age was 41, that didn't matter, but you never know how someone else is gonna take being mentioned about their age. Yeah.
I have to
let me quote from this thing, since we're on this subject, if you don't mind.
No.
I talked about that she tried to cooperate with the public perception of her, and then I quote her, and Cheryl Tiegs said, "I never wanted my life so out there," she said, "but I left myself open. It was the party era, so I went to the discos just like everybody else. The thing was, people would see my face, but nobody knew what was behind the face. When people dug deep to find out, to dissect me, it was painful. Celebrity and stardom and all that rings a bad bell. I never wanted to be labeled anything." And so, you hear this from a lot of celebrities. "Oh, I hate this. I don't want to be this." But I really, she lived a very private life after all that stuff in the discos, after her 2 marriages and stuff like that. As she got, later into her 20s, she kind of disappeared from the social scene and started to become a businesswoman. Mm-hmm. And you're right. I quoted in her, I would have thought she was, and she was. She seemed very, very bright and intelligent to me.
What kind of feedback did you get from, let's say, Julie or anyone at SI? Because I have to imagine if Cheryl wasn't pleased with the article, she would have told someone other than just you, no?
She probably did tell Julie. Julie never told me of their conversation. Julie loved the article. When I wrote it before it appeared in the magazine, she thought it was terrific. Most of the articles, I reread the articles about the other girls that we did, and that the other writers got to do, and they were all kind of different from the one I wrote. And I assume that the models all liked them, and that's why I was surprised to get this. I say it was a letter. It was a 1-page note from Cheryl, and I looked at the letterhead when I got it, and it was a personal note to me, and I was thrilled to open it. I was trying that Cheryl Tiegs would write me a letter, and she starts out, "Dear Curry, just a note to tell you how much I loathed the article." I'm reading this and I'm going, "Oh no." She said the focus was unnecessarily negative and the compliments were backhanded. Well, come on. I'm glad you felt differently, and Julie Campbell felt differently. And if it had been bad article that portrayed Cheryl Tiegs in a bad light, we would never have run it.
Correct.
So
Correct.
I got it. In my defense, I hate to be on the other side of Cheryl Tiegs on this, but I say that.
Well, I tell you what, she would love for you to tell people now she's 41.
She probably looks just as good too.
Well, she probably does.
Yeah.
Hey, so Curry, it's time for our trivia segment again, 50-50, and we're going to keep the swimsuit issue as kind of our our background. So
I got one other story to tell you. You say you asked about did any of the girls push this off and not want to do it? I will tell you a story about Christy Brinkley, who was on the cover many times. I don't remember. I don't think any of them were on more than 4, but Christy probably was on 4. But one of them she was not on, and Julie Campbell told me this story, and I don't know. Everybody knows this story, so I don't think I'm talking out of school here. But all the models, all the girls would meet at Kennedy to take a private plane to this shoot wherever they were going. Well, I don't know if it was private, actually. I take that back. It probably wasn't. But they would meet together. They all would go together. And they would meet at Kennedy. And one day, and Julie would be out there, like a rodeo, corralling all the models and all their friends and agents and stuff and getting them on the plane. And Christy Brinkley arrived one time. She drove up in a big limo with Billy Joel. She was married to the time, and a few little kids. And she ushered them out and sort of appeared in this outrageous outfit and just sort of sashayed by Julie Campbell into Kennedy, and told Julie, she said, Julie, I'm going to bring Billy and the kids along this time. They won't get in the way. We'll just cut a couple rooms. And Julie Campbell looked at her like she was from Mars. And she said, what are you talking about? We don't have spouses or kids on our shoot, on the swimsuit issue. We never have any husbands or children. And Christy Brinkley, who was very big time at the time, very famous model, maybe the most famous of all, looked at Julie Campbell and said, no, but we're going to do it this time. It'll be okay. Billy will just be, and she was ushering Billy around like he was a little servant, they tell me. And Billy Joel this is Billy Joel when he's acting, of course they did not stay married for long, but at any rate, she's ushering Billy Joel around, get this suitcase out, get this out. And meanwhile, Julie Campbell's telling her, no, you can't do this. We're not coming. I'm sorry. We can't do this. You have to remember the rules. And Christy Brinkley said, well, she kept insisting that she was going to do this. And Julie Campbell kept insisting, no, you're not. We're leaving without you, which she did. They all went and left Christy Brinkley at the curb, so to speak.
Wow.
And she had to usher. She ushered poor little Billy Joe. She ushered to shoot him into the limo and shoot the kids in the limo and drove back into New York. 2 days later.
Wow.
Yeah. 2 days.
Hung out.
And Julie Campbell was tough. She ran the thing. 2 days later, Julie's in God knows where, Bimini or somewhere, and she gets a call from Christy Brinkley. And Christy Brinkley said, Julie, this is Christy. I'm so sorry about what happened. I really didn't understand it. I just wanted the family to be there and thought the kids and I really want to apologize. And Julie said, well, thank you for calling. And Christy said, well, Julie, can I come now? Can I come now without, just be me? And Julie Campbell said, absolutely not. You're out this year. Maybe some other time.
Wow.
That's who ran things. Julie Campbell.
Wow.
Tough babe, man. A tough babe. And by the way, she was as gorgeous as any of the models. So, and she knew, who she was, and she ran it like that and told Christy Brinkley, you're not coming this year.
That is awesome.
Wow.
We need a few parents like that.
We do.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's then keep the Christy Brinkley theme for this trivia question, okay? So in 2013, Sports Illustrated came out with a list of the top 50 models to appear in the swimsuit issue. And they came out eventually with their top 10 list. True or false, Christy Brinkley was actually ranked number 1 on that list.
Boy, I never saw that. I have I have some personal favorites, but she would have been my number one. So I'll say it's true. She's number one.
No, she was number 8. This came out on the 60th anniversary of the magazine. Any guess who number 1 was?
Number 8.
Cheryl Tiegs.
Boy.
Tiegs was 6 on this list.
Oh, okay.
Anyone else have a guess?
Kate Upton?
Tiegs was what?
3, so you're getting warmer.
Tiegs was 8?
Kirsty was 8th on this list.
I'll say L.
L, yeah.
L, you're correct. L.
You know your swimsuit magazines.
Right. And Kathy Ireland was number 2 on the list.
Where was Kate Upton?
3. She was 3 on this list. And again, this.
Oh, there you go. There you go. That's my personal favorite. Yeah.
Yeah, this list came out in, I want to say, 2013 on the 60th.
Well, of course, people were remembering. I mean, Cheryl goes way back too. Were there any of the older girls up in the top 5 or whatever?
Marilyn Tyndall.
It was McPherson, Ireland, Upton, Tyra Banks, Heidi Klum, Tiegs, Decker, Brooklyn Decker.
Oh yeah.
Brinkley.
Well, look at these girls now. Look at, for instance, Heidi Klum's, a TV star, right, and a longtime TV star, and of course Kate Upton is retired to being the wife of a baseball player. Right.
Tyra Banks has been on TV for a long time.
Yeah, exactly. And I would bet that they credit the swimsuit issue for really being a huge part of their career and how they got to where they are.
Oh, for sure. I think I read somewhere where Kathy Ireland is her brand and business empire is that of Martha Stewart's. I mean, she's done incredibly well.
Yeah, yeah.
Brooklyn Decker's been in a bunch of movies. Yeah, it's not so bad.
Yeah.
Right, and it was interesting in this list. They'll list the years they were in the swimsuit issues. Like Christy was in 8 of them between 75 and 2004. So the 75 issue that were 50 years ago, that was the first time she appeared in the magazine.
Was Cheryl the oldest of the top girl of those 8?
Interesting. Curry, these women will be forever young in the eyes of people like me that grew up watching them. Cheryl and Christy and Elle Macpherson, just to name a few. And they have the men and women of Sports Illustrated to thank for that. Men like the one and only Kirkpatrick. Thank you once again, Curry, for spending some
you're the
time
best,
with
man.
us on the Past Star Prime podcast.
Well, thank you guys. It was neat going back and remembering and reminiscing. I'll never, as I said, I'll never forget the lime green outfit.
Well, I hope you didn't loathe your time with us.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
And we're all older than 41, so you can call us our age anytime.
That's great. No, it's a pleasure. Thank you again.
Curry Kirkpatrick, everyone, joins another Kurt Gowdy Award winner, Bob Ryan, as our only 3-time guests. Next up, from the Queens of the Beaches to the King of College Hoops in 1975.
Bernard King, a freshman at Tennessee, and he is good, really good. 28.3 points a game in just under 32 minutes of action for the Vols, shooting 63% from the floor. One of the greatest mid-range games in basketball history. Comes from a poor section of Brooklyn, but attended a middle-class school. Was not heavily into street life, and on orders from his mother, had to be home by 9 every night. So while his buddies got high on drugs and acquainted with the police, he turned on Kojak and tried to pass geometry, but had a little trouble in the NBA. Yeah. I think had some drug issues.
And injuries.
And then turned it around once Golden State always had their pulse on it. They traded him to the Knicks for Michael Ray Richardson. And Bernard had a great career once he got to New York.
Yeah, because it was also Bernard King was drafted by the Nets. Nets also drafted his brother Albert King, who was supposed to be better, and he wasn't. But I think I found that interesting is being drafted 7th by the Nets. He's eventually traded to Utah along with 2 other players for Rich Kelly. And he was also traded to Golden State for Wayne Cooper. You would think a guy that's in the Hall of Fame, like Bernard King, nothing against those 2 guys. Rich Kelly's name will come up again here soon. We're traded for those guys. And then he ended up eventually getting to New York and becoming what he was.
I remember one time he really was coming into his own, and I think he had back-to-back 50-point games, which for a while there when we were going up, like Wilt averaged 50 a game, but that was before our time. Before Jordan, really, a 50-point game just stopped happening, and then he had 2 in a row, and that's before the 3-point rule.
Right.
And so it was like, wow, he did it not once but twice. It was pretty impressive, Mark.
I mean, but to me, like his golden years were obviously he played for a lot of NBA teams, but between 82 and 87 when he was on the Knicks, those were his golden years, and he won. He was All-Star. He made the All-Star team several of those years with the Knicks. So to me, when I picture Bernard King, I picture him in a New York Knicks uniform.
He was one of my favorite players growing up because he was so exciting. It wasn't like the game is now. He could take the ball to the hoop and make jump shots. He was a great player.
He was kind of like reminded me of Bob McAdoo a little bit.
Yeah.
Mid-range baseline jumper.
Yep.
So quick.
Yep.
Yeah. What else in college hoops, Mark?
Well, Stanford, who center Ed Schweitzer had 22 points for Stanford, and he also pulled down 13 rebounds. But anyway, he can't all 8 free throws as he led Stanford past UCLA. It's the first time that the Cardinal or the Indians, they were probably still the Indians at the time, or were they the Cardinal? Anyway, defeated UCLA for the first time since 1966. So about a 9-year period. But then again, UCLA against just about every team in the Big Eight. That would be like,
We know Oregon and Oregon State the year prior, but other than that, not too many Pac-8 teams were.
It's UCLA's only loss so far of the year. They're 13-1.
But who helped that Stanford team beat UCLA?
Well, I have a good guess.
Rich Kelly. Bringing him back. I thought Rich Kelly was traded for him, and he was on Stanford. I can think of that. But Rich Kelly, he didn't want to divulge his exact height. He was against telling anybody that. He held his ground.
Was he 6'4" or 6'9"?
Exactly. Yeah, 6'11".
He's shorter today, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, we're going to take a small little break here and be back in 1 minute. Mark?
Hello, this is Mark with the ad of the day. Okay.
An accent.
No, we went down under.
Yeah. Hi, mate.
That ain't a knife. This is a knife. Anyway, so there's an ad introducing the Honda Civic, what the world is coming to, And I remember when they said Honda makes cars now. I'm like, what? They're a motorcycle company. What are you talking about? And I didn't think much, but this was the beginning of the whole Honda, invasion of America. But the Honda Civic, and it's the new brilliant, get you 28 miles to the gallon, 38 on the highway and stuff. But of course, the car is really boxy, like most cars in the 70s. So it doesn't really look like the Civic of today. Like my daughter drives a Civic, but it's kind of a sportier looking Civic. So her Civic, it doesn't look anything like this.
My first car was a Honda Accord. So
I had a Toyota Celica.
I think we've same thing.
Yeah.
My favorite
Yours,
car.
that's more sporty.
Yeah.
I had a white Honda Accord with a spoiler on the back. I love that. I had that 13 years. Stick. Oh, that was a great. I love that car.
Sticks anymore.
God, I miss those stick days. Yeah, no, I flipped my first car. The second car was sorry.
For the record, Bill, you go first.
Okay, the Indianapolis Racers, they promoted its first home game with Cleveland as guaranteed win night. That's pretty gutsy, but hey, they said each fan that showed up will get a free ticket if they lose to the last place team. They didn't. They won 4-2, but I just thought guaranteed win night.
I wonder if you're there if you're rooting against them.
Yeah, because you're going to get a free ticket the next night. Yeah. You don't have those too much.
Damn it, they're winning.
Stop scoring goals, you loser.
Mark.
And I have this expansion team in the NBA that hadn't been playing well is all of a sudden in a mini streak, getting back-to-back wins over Houston and Seattle. Who's this expansion team? It's the Jazz. No, not those Mormons from Utah. This is the New Orleans Jazz, which it really explains why the team was called the Jazz. It was born in New Orleans. Yeah. Pete Maravich led them with 42 points.
He often did.
Yes, he did. But yeah, that's the New Orleans Jazz. But hey, you know what? Utah Jazz, I'm so used to now that
it doesn't bother. No. If anything, they should start playing Jazz in Utah.
Yes,
probably
get them going.
Do now.
Right. I'll do Harmon Killebrew, the 5th leading home run hitter of all time, signs a one-year deal with the Kansas City Royals. In his 21 years of baseball, 14 with the Twins, he hit 559 homers, compiled a .514 slugging percentage. In 1969, he's the AL MVP with 49 home runs, 140 RBIs, 145 walks. Now, 50 years later, he is 12th all-time in home runs because he had 14 that last season in 75 for the Royals and finished with 573. One of the more underrated great sluggers in the history of
He's
baseball.
lost in.
Right?
Yeah, no one ever mentions his name.
Like their that generation's Jim Thome.
Yeah.
Because nobody talks about Jim Thome,
No, they
who
don't.
has like 660 home runs or something like that.
When I was a kid, first starting to follow baseball in the late '60s, the two power hitters in the American League were Frank Howard and Harmon Killebrew. Yeah. And Frank Howard looked like a power hitter. He was like 6'7", he was
Big
just
guy.
massive. Harmon Killebrew was like 5'10".
Yeah.
He was not a big, at least in terms of height. He was squat and power.
And he had the greatest name.
That's a great
Killebrew. You think of the beer cover, the ads they could do. Hey, Killebrew in the Harmon section.
Right.
Yeah, if he was
Just
an actor,
awesome.
they'd go, "Oh, that really? Okay,
Right.
well, we don't want you with a stage name yet."
Yeah,
No, that's my real name.
Just awesome name.
Killebrew and
Yeah.
to kill
Yeah.
a brew.
Billy,
I'd be knocking
faces
him
in the crowd.
Patricia Brown, she's a jockey, one of the most famous female jockeys ever in the history of horse racing. But in 1984, I read a little more about her. She's riding a horse named Astrola. When the 3-year-old filly broke down, the fall alone, they said, would have been serious, but she was trampled by 3 other horses. She suffered 2 broken vertebrae, a broken rib, a compound fracture of her left collarbone, and multiple fractures to her left shoulder. She spent 73 days in a hospital where she had surgery included the insertion of a steel pin and a bone graft, still came back and raced after that, and has a family of racers that still to this day race. But just that thought, you get trampled.
I mean, that's where I say, those jockeys are a different breed, man.
They
it looks
are.
like they're just riding a horse. No way. And these
That's
horses,
not riding a horse.
Oh, crazy. 19th hole, I'll go first. Congratulations. I vote for SI as the bravest sports magazine and publication. It takes real guts to print a feature story on a national champion football team that has a loss to Arkansas and a tie with Cal. Oklahoma did just squeak by Texas and had a slow game with Baylor. Those magnificent Trojans couldn't seem to win their close ones. John Underwood should have done more research on the word hogwash and paid less attention to UPI. Drew Wilcoxon from
Oklahoma.
Norman, Oklahoma.
What a shock.
Surprising.
We had another one recently that was, for Ohio State, and he was from Columbus, Ohio. You would think they would kind of root those out, be like, we're not going to take any from right in their own hometown.
I think what they have to realize is I think the poll wouldn't recognize Oklahoma.
Right.
So that took,
Yeah.
a team away.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the reason why. And then
because they were on probation.
Right. And you had Notre Dame, I think Notre Dame won their bowl game. A couple things had to happen for
Right.
USC.
Notre Dame
to
beat
get-
Alabama.
Yeah, USC was 5th.
Yes.
Right.
And
going
they
into
jumped
that.
everybody.
Yeah. Billy.
Okay, just back to horse racing again. A gentleman writes, contrary to popular belief, one detail of your article on jockey Chris McCarron is not entirely correct. The high school Chris attended is not in, how do you pronounce it, Dorchester? Dorchester, Mass., his hometown, but in the historic north end of Boston, from which another famous gentleman also set out on horseback. There you go. So they got it, yeah.
And that would be?
I'll go with Paul Revere on this one, baby. He took the tour there, though. That was cool.
Yeah. Very, very funny. Yeah. There you have it. Sports Illustrated from January 27th, 1975. I want to thank Kirkpatrick for once again joining the Three Stooges here and putting up with us. Until next week, for Mo and Larry, I'm Curly, and we are
Past our bride.
And that's the end of the episode.
Brought to you by Lucky Stripe Cigarettes.